Good morning, my people. This is the Watchman on the 3rd of May, 2022. More facts and more information has come out with respect to the unfortunate and tragic death of Constable Gilles, who was shot in the back of the neck, according to the post-mortem done. And from recent events, it appears more and more likely that he was shot accidentally during what is called friendly fire. And we could also say that it appears very likely that the person who was the initial suspect, Mr. Romney, who then became a potential witness, then became a person of interest, was not engaged in the shooting that led to his death. That is what we could speculate. Some people say that we should not speculate. But why not? That's what all investigators do. We look at the information presented, we form hypotheses, and we look to see if there's evidence to support it. And if there's not, we discard it and choose something else. Of course, I don't expect us to engage in wild speculation and wild conspiracies like QAnon in America and those kind of crazy groups and spew all kinds of nonsense as being fact. But in this case, we have sufficient information and evidence from which we can make reasonable assumptions, because as all trained police officers, we know, we look at the evidence, we look at the law in terms of actus reus and mens rea, and we look at the investigation principles, including looking for a motive, because even though motive doesn't have to be proved in law, in a court of law, but if you could know why something was done, it might help you to determine who did it. So therefore, that is what we look at in terms of examining evidence and information. Now, we don't know in Mr. Romney's case what any future designation may be. He may end up being called a victim if police officers are accused and charged for any offense. And let me start by saying that I hold no brief for Mr. Romney at all. I saw a picture on social media which proposed to show Mr. Romney holding a high-powered rifle. And if that picture is in fact a correct one, it hasn't been doctored or it is not faked or photoshopped, then it would lead to a reasonable conclusion that Mr. Romney has either now or in the past been engaged in what can be defined as criminal acts. Because possession of an illegal firearm, because I have no evidence that he has an FUL, then that in itself is a criminal act. And then we have the situation where the police said they went to arrest Mr. Romney on that day for an outstanding warrant, and warrants can only be for criminal offenses if police officers are involved. So let's look at what happened and try to have some reasonable analysis about it. The DPP's office has made a decision that Mr. Romney has not committed any crimes and should therefore be released from police custody, and he was. Now that is big news, because in my opinion, the DPP's office will only do so in 3 instances. One, where there's no credible evidence to support that Mr. Romney committed any offense. Number 2, that the DPP's office has considered and refuted or discarded or refused to believe the evidence given by the police officers the initial evidence on information on the scene that they were being shot at, and they were being shot at by Mr. Romney. And this led to the death of Constable Gilks. Or, thirdly, one or more of the police officers on the exercise has recanted what they initially said and added with other information or evidence from other witnesses. The DPP's officers determined that the allegation of murder or shooting with intent, any of those criminal offenses involving Mr. Romney, does not apply. What is shocking to me is that if they went to arrest him on an outstanding warrant, it means that that warrant is still outstanding. Unless the DPP's office has decided that in order to make the gentleman a cooperating witness, they will disregard or quash the outstanding warrant. And the DPP's office can do that, okay, through an nolle pros. And then it would mean that the crime for which he allegedly was being searched for on warrant was one which the DPP's office feels confident that they could bypass, strike down, so that they could get to the truth in this particular instance. Now that raises all kinds of red flags. And it makes the commissioner's initial outbursts even more embarrassing for him and for the police service. No, I'm not going to speculate on the outcome of the investigation, but what I can say is that there are certain offenses that will be considered. Whether the police officers lied about the true exchange on that day, whether the police officers in reckless disregard fired off shots towards an unarmed man, being Mr. Romney, and in that case, they themselves become liable to be charged for shooting with intent, for example, and as a consequence, possible manslaughter in the unfortunate death of Constable Gilks. And it is not being helped by the fact that the Commissioner of Police seems unable or unwilling to control the narrative coming out of the police service. Because I was reliably informed that during the funeral services for Constable Gilks, at which the Commissioner was present, another senior officer was making statements alluding to that Constable Gilks was a hero, which he was, because he was doing a job as a police officer to the best of his ability, which makes him a hero by itself. But that he was, even after he was shot, he continued firing his weapon. The question will be, firing at who? Does it mean that there are other persons who were present who were shooting at the police that could exonerate Mr. Romney, but at the same time exonerate the police officers from any unlawful shooting by showing that they were engaged in a shootout with some other person? Or is that officer who made that statement just blowing smoke? And why would the Commissioner not control the narrative even at the funeral by letting them know what the official position is and what should and should not be said when they are engaging the public and the media? This case could be a watershed one in the operations of the police service, because it will determine whether we need to have now a system of elders within the police service to assist the commissioner and guide him, not only the commissioner, but the executive, because it seems that the commissioner is talking, but the rest of the executive is silent. I know they didn't have much meetings under Gary Griffith's time, but have they been having meetings now? Have they discussed this matter? And have they counseled the commissioner as to what they can do? Because they're supposed to have experience. If he lacks the investigative skills and knowledge, I'm sure there are people sitting at the table who have it and who should say something. And then I will say it again. We need to have a better representation on television and radio in terms of properly trained, properly resourced spokesmen who know what they are talking about and not extemporing or bluffing or just going around willy-nilly, as is the case that is happening now with respect to our representatives on Beyond the Tape. It is very important because, remember, we had a lot of laughs about it when a police officer, a senior police officer, went on Beyond the Tape and said, "Happy Diwali to our Muslim brothers and sisters," which not only appears very unprofessional, but it means that there is a racial component and a religious component in that we are so blind to our society that our senior officers don't know the nature, the religious and ethnic makeup of the country to have an understanding of what is happening in holidays. Many people did not even say Eid Mubarak to the Muslims because they are so stuck in their Christian beliefs that they fail or refuse to understand that there's a bigger world out there and we are all living in a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious society, and all of that must be reflected in what we do as police officers. This is what I have to say for today, the 3rd of May. Thank you very much. Have a good day, my people.